Tolls. I am the booktube goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. And since it's the end of the year, I thought I would do my top 10 books that I read this year. And I looked up my stats, which were not on Goodreads because I haven't been keeping up on Goodreads because it wasn't connected to my Amazon account. So I figured out how to disconnect my old Goodreads account from my Amazon account and connect it to my BookTube Goddess account. So hopefully 2021 will be a lot easier for me to track books. So I figured out I have read 53 books this year, which is actually more than I thought I've read, which includes ebooks, physical books, which I only got a couple, and audiobooks. So I broke down the stats. I read 25 adult fantasies, so 50% were adult fantasies, 4 horrors, 6 middle grades. For some reason, I thought I read more middle grades than that, but there you go. Let's see, I have a note back here. I read 2 nonfictions, 6 science fictions, and 10 YA. So 50% adult fantasy, that's about right. Like I said, I read more books than I thought I did this year, so good job me. But I know it's not nearly as many as some other booktubers read. But I went through and picked out my 10 top faves. So let's go through them. So number 10 is Cinders and Sparrows by Stephen Bachmann. It's a middle grade book, fantasy about a girl named Zeta Bridgeborn. She is 12 years old. She discovers she inherited a castle of witches under the care of the evil Mrs. Cantanker, with the help of the castle's 2 servants, Bram and Minnifer, who are about Zeta's age. Zeta finds her power, uncovers a mystery or 2, and finds out what happened to her family. This book I thought was so well written, so engaging, and really reminded me this is why I read middle grade books. Number 9 is the Renegades trilogy by Marissa Meyer. It's a young adult fantasy. I'm including all 3 books here: Renegades, Archenemies, and Supernova. Now, Marissa Meyer is a fantastic author, especially in terms of pacing and characters, at least in my opinion. She knows how to tell a story that is very clean and easy to read. Now, I consider the Lunar Chronicles one of the best YA science fiction series I've read, and Renegades, again, showcases her absolute mastery over story crafting, the craft of telling a story. This is an alternate universe where superheroes and supervillains exist. The main character is Nova, who has grown up as a supervillain and hates superheroes who are taking over all law enforcement in a benevolently dictatorial manner. She infiltrates this superhero organization that's running things, and there she meets Adrian, a superhero boy her age who also has a secret. Well, I really love this series and found it extremely addictive to read. I was a little disappointed in the ending. I felt in this series Myers was really invested in exploring gray areas, that there's no true black and white, no truly good or evil characters. But I felt like she lost her nerve at the end and didn't really go there. But despite that, I highly recommend this series. It was a fun read. Number 3 is the Daevabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. It's an adult fantasy, and I'm including all 3 of the books here: City of Brass, Kingdom of Copper, and Empire of Gold. It is about Nari, a young woman who grew up as an orphan in the streets of Cairo. And she scams people pretending she has supernatural powers to heal people. Spoiler alert, she actually does have supernatural healing powers, but she hides it behind phony rituals and pretending to be a street mystic. So she is kidnapped by an ancient jinn named Dara, who brings her to Daevabad, the city of brass, where she is at odds with the handsome Prince Alizad. There's politics, a love triangle, hate to love, mysteries, battles, mysticism, everything you want in a fantasy using the Middle East and Muslim mythos rather than the Western setting you usually see in fantasies. Highly recommend this trilogy. Thought it was fantastic. Number 7 is The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune, a young adult fantasy, and this is another superhero novel. So the main character is Nick, who writes superhero fan fiction, which are basically imagined love stories between himself and a superhero who's very hot named Shadowstar. And he has a best friend, Seth, who is obviously in love with Nick and puts up with Nick's crush on a superhero. Now, what's really great about this story is the point of view from Nick's perspective, which is, of course, colored by his ADHD. And it was done in a manner that didn't make his condition feel like a disability. It just made his way of thinking and his way of being different just feel unique and special. Now, this is not a terribly deep novel, but the story kept me engaged, the characters kept me laughing, and I definitely recommend it for anyone looking for a fun, light read. I think you'd be surprised. Number 6 is Hollow Kingdom by Kira Jane Buxton in adult science fiction. And what makes this book really stand out, like the last one, was the unique point of view, only this time it's from a pet crow named Shitturd during a zombie apocalypse. It is the first-person account from the very cranky, foul-mouthed, curmudgeonly crow whose owner, Big Jim, which St. Shitturd's personality obviously was guided by. Big Jim is slowly turning into a zombie, much to the chagrin of St. and Big Jim's dog, Dennis. So St. and Dennis go on a quest to find a cure for Big Jim. And I wish I could make this book sound better than what it is just describing the plot, because it is such a fantastic novel. It's funny and tragic, and actually quite deep. I know it's a big ask to pick up a book from a non-human point of view for many people, but just trust me, it's worth it. Number 5 is the Licanius Trilogy by James Islington, which is an adult fantasy which I've never talked about on this channel because I was listening to it as an audiobook, but it includes The Shadow of What Was, An Echo of Things to Come, and The Light of All That Falls. And if you haven't figured it out from the titles of those books, it may have a little to do with time travel. Now, these books are huge, and I listen to them as audiobooks, so they're about 30 hours for each book. And if you are looking for really long audiobooks, I can attest that the narrator is fantastic. You never get confused as to who's talking. He has a wonderfully deep voice, which really brings the book to life. Now, this book is a traditional fantasy, at least in terms of setting and characters. But the twist is, like I said before, there's a big emphasis on time, which includes time travel and those odd time plot points and flashbacks and paradoxes. Now, I'm not a huge fan of time travel stories, and I'm not a huge fan of flashbacks, but there are always exceptions, and the Licanius Trilogy for me is a big exception. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's about a boy named Davian who has the powers of the gifted, which means he is spirited away to a special school to learn how to control these magic powers. Now, gifted in this world are treated as second-class citizens and are limited by magical tenets of what they can use their powers for. And he has 2 friends at school, a girl named Asha and a boy named Rur. Now, these 3 are the focal characters throughout the books, and as the trilogy progresses, their stories split apart, much like Lord of the Rings, where each hobbit has their own storyline, or Wheel of Time, when each of the 2 rivers characters go off in different directions. But like any epic fantasy, there's a lot of convoluted plots and stories. There's a lot of focus on free will and God and fate, and I thought it was really interesting. If you're looking for a big epic fantasy with a satisfying ending, I think you'll be pleased with the Licanius trilogy. Number 4 is Freak Show by James St. James, a contemporary YA about a very feminine and fey 17-year-old boy named Billy Bloom, who wears makeup, sometimes dresses in drag, and wears outrageous outfits, who moves in with his uncaring father in rural Florida and has to go to a very conservative high school. As you can imagine, Billy faces homophobia, bullying, uncaring teachers, unrequited infatuations, and religious fanatics. This is a first-person account from Billy's POV, and the writing is just wonderful. The prose comes alive on the page, and Billy's voice is arch, funny, brave, sassy, and he pulls a lot of queer references from all over the place, probably more references than what a 17-year-old usually would know, but this was written by a 50-something-year-old queer man, so just the same, I found it really engaging. This book has also been made into a movie, and it's a great story about a brave, queer, effeminate boy going up against all odds. Number 3 is The Wasp Factory, a novel by Iain Banks, which is a contemporary horror. Now, this was written in 1984, but I read it for the Trick or Treat readathon this year. And I've read this Scottish author's science fiction novels before, which I highly recommend, but I didn't know what to expect with this novel. Suffice to say, it is a very disturbing story about a 16-year-old psychopath named Frank who has already killed 3 other children when he was much younger. It has a wild ending. There are really grotesque scenes that stick with you. It really is a horror story with, shall we say, elevated writing. As much as I was impressed with the writing and storytelling, I find it hard to actually recommend this novel because of how disturbing it is. But if you are looking for a macabre horror, you will certainly find it here. Number 2 is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sáenz. And this is a gay YA novel written in 2012, but I had heard so much about it that I decided to pick it up this year for Gay Pride, and I now understand why people love it so much. It's actually set in the 80s, and it is the first-person account of Aristotle Mendoza called Ari by his family and friends. He's a Mexican-American who is the youngest son of a Vietnam vet and a high school teacher. And he meets another boy his age named Dante Quintana, who becomes his best friend during a summer break. Now, Ari is a loner and is obsessed with his older brother who is in jail that his family won't speak about. And Dante is a free spirit who loves poetry and reading and has a really soft heart, like wanting to take care of a wounded bird. Now, this is a love story, but I would hazard to say this is more of the love story between friends than a romance. There's no love or lust at first sight. It's a friendship that grows and develops. The writing style is simple and straightforward, yet somehow it's extremely deep. The author really knows how to show the story rather than tell a story, and it's a very moving and very impressive novel. Now, number 1, some of you may guess if you've been watching me, but it is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, a adult fantasy. And this is what I called a contemporary fairy tale. It's a high-concept story about Addie LaRue, a woman in the 1700s making a deal with the devil. Or not really a devil, but a spiritual power, or maybe it's a devil. Anyway, she makes a deal to be free from a life where she's trapped in the small French town where she grew up. And the deal is twisted to mean that she will live forever and never age, but no one will ever be able to remember who she is or that she even exists. which has all sorts of ramifications, like not being able to hold a job or make money or have a permanent place to live. I was blown away by this novel, especially since I was expecting more of a traditional fantasy, since that's what I'm used to from V.E. Schwab, but instead got this masterpiece that really makes you think about what life means, or what it's like to have relationships, or leaving a mark on the world. Now, Addie LaRue does meet a man who can actually remember her, and I have to warn you, if you are expecting a traditional romance, love, fantasy story, that's not this story. Yes, there's a romance subplot, but it is not the main story, which is Addie's story arc on how she survives and develops through the centuries. So, just to warn you, if you go in expecting a romance novel, you will be quite disappointed. But if you go in with an open mind, I think you will find yourself utterly enchanted with this novel, like I was. Please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I really want to grow in the upcoming year. And comment below. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read in 2020. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.